Well, so you want to invest in real estate. Today, what you need to know. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, how do you get started in real estate? Dr. John Yoegel is here to tell us how in his book, Real Estate Investing in Plain English. Dr. Yoegel, welcome to Prudent Money.
Thanks, Bob. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. You know, I really do appreciate a book like yours because I know of, and I talked through the years to so many people who go, I'd love to be a real estate investor, but I just don't know how, and quite frankly, it can be intimidating. I find your book, though, to be very easy to read, very well organized, and it's there to be a teaching companion to really show the person who wants to be a real estate investor how to do it. So congratulations on your book.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the compliment.
Now, you start the book with the various types of real estate programs you could be using. How do you determine, out of all the different categories, which is the right one to select?
Well, I'll have to ask you a question back. What do you mean by select? Because all the categories are sort of interdependent.
Well, which one makes the most sense for you as a new real estate investor?
Oh wow! I think you need to start with things like selection of properties, and of all things, I would jump ahead to property management because something I certainly deal with my students all the time is the Well, let me answer this question this way. Let me tell you a little story.
Sure.
I'll start out when I do teach commercial properties or investing, I'll start out with the question, how many people in the classroom want to own an investment property? And almost 100% of the people will put their hands up. Then my second question is, how many of you want to be a landlord? And 3/4 of them put their hands down. And right, exactly.
That's so true. That is so true.
And we talk about that because especially for beginning investors, and you brought up that, how does one get started? The beginning investor often has to buy a smaller property, what we here up in the Northeast call a two-family, what other parts of the country might call a duplex.
Right.
And those properties usually do not throw off enough cash to support professional management. So it means hands-on management. It means being a landlord. Unlike larger commercial properties that tend to be managed professionally. So if you're not prepared to be a landlord, to do as much hands-on as you can, then real estate investing is not for you. And I always hesitate when I talk about it that way because I don't want to appear negative about it. But I've just heard too many stories, and I've met people along the way who basically have tried it and said, no, that's just not emotional for me. I don't have
sure.
Or the time. For some people, they simply don't have the time, because that's the other thing I tell people. It may be a part-time job, but it's a job. And if you're not prepared to treat it like a job, then you need to do something else with your time.
Yeah, I mean, that's
your question.
Absolutely. No, that definitely puts it in perspective, because the property management is somewhat of the harder part of the process after you get the deal done. Well, and so you gotta like that. But there is a lot that you can learn from doing that. Obviously,
sure.
Obviously important to have some capital to start. What if you don't have enough capital to get started? What are your options?
Well, a number of years back, you probably remember these no money down folks were all over the place. And in fact, one of the I had some personal experience with that because in my career, if I could share that with you, my background was primarily in government real estate. I worked for the local county in New York, and anytime there would be, I'd start getting calls, a flurry of calls. Could I get on the list of the county auction properties? Sure, if we have auctions, glad to put you on the list. But I would always know that one of the no money down guys had been through town doing one of their presentations and all that.
Sure.
And it's certainly possible. I mean, government auctions, we had few and far between. People think government's constantly auctioning properties, and they're very often, to use the phrase, dogs. I mean, they're just not properties that are easily developable. There's a reason that the government ends up owning.
Sure.
But they are available. But they, of course, require some cash to buy them. But in terms of the real no money down, mostly we're talking, I guess, talking about two things. One is if an owner, that is a seller, is willing to take back the full mortgage on the property, what we would call a seller mortgage, then you could potentially have a no money down situation. Now, sometimes those I would say, I mean, I couldn't give you a statistic, but I would say that long term is few and far between. So an owner is not going to give you a 30-year mortgage like a bank would. But to get you into the property with, say, a 10-year mortgage or something along those lines, while you accumulate some cash or recoup some money so that you can then fully finance it. It's not quite no money down, but it might be less money down to be able to get a regular bank mortgage and a partial mortgage from the owner of the property. So that could be a no money down situation. The other thing, and the rules are fairly strict, and I'm certainly no expert on them, but the other thing would be government-financed properties. Now, FHA and VA, Veterans Administration, they do allow 100% financing on the properties, but generally speaking, they have to be owner-occupied. So you're not going to buy a separate investment property. Now, those rules may be a little flexible, and this is where I have to say I have no particular expertise or experience, but they may be particularly flexible for, say, a duplex, where you're going to live in one of the units. So they may allow 100% financing on that. But those are and of course, then we kind of expand it to if you want to include other people, if you want to have a partner or two, and you be the primary owner, manager of the property. That's, you put in the sweat equity, so to speak, and they are silent partners, if you will, but they put up the cash. I mean, in essence, that's zero down for you, but there is still cash involved.
Talk a little. I've had this question quite a bit, and I've never really checked into it, but I believe that they do exist. Using your IRA as a funding vehicle.
You know what? I actually heard that too at one point, and again, I have to beg off on not knowing the details of it. But yes, as a matter of fact, I did have a friend who was looking at an investment property for a while down. I think she was in Maryland, as a matter of fact, and she was talking about that. She was an attorney, by the way, which is why my ears perked up when she was talking about it, where she would use the IRA. She could convert the IRA, if you will, and use it. But again, remember, that's not no money down. That's just tying up your money somewhere else.
Sure.
So you've got to look towards, okay, so what am I doing to the other part of my life, which is when I want to retire? Am I going to be able to get that cash out, or is the investment going to support my retirement? Now that's a possibility. That if enough rents are coming in, it's better than 3% interest. But yeah, that's a possibility.
I want to jump back just a second and ask you one more question on these commercials. The real story about these commercials and what they're proposing, and they make it look like real estate is easy. And what's going on with these commercials?
Oh, Bob, you really touched the chord with me.
I figured I would.
Because you really did. Because I do talk about this, and not to pick on. And again, I'll kind of give you something I tell my classes. Not to pick on any particular show. But if you look at some of the stuff on TV, and not so much the commercials now, but some of the, let's be cautious here, some of the shows that portray people shopping for houses and working with real estate agents and all of that, especially working with real estate agents, because I do teach a lot of what we call pre-license courses. That is courses designed to help you get your real estate license, usually required by the states to get your real estate license. And I always tell them, if you watch TV, it looks like if you can memorize the phrases, you'll love the bedroom, let's walk into the basement, take a look at the beautiful backyard, you're an expert. You've sold a house. That's all you need to know. And real estate is far more complicated than that. In terms of, and again, I don't want to sound discouraging to anybody, because it's a terrific field. It offers a great deal of flexibility that people like. Even though all salespeople really technically have to work for a broker, it's very self-directed in terms of a business. It's like owning your own business with, frankly, a very cheap investment. I mean, you don't have to rent a building or rent space or whatever. You just connect yourself with a broker. You do a lot these days. You can do a lot of work online, work out of your house, and all of that. None of that means it's easy to make a lot of money in it. It's an easy business to get into. One of my mentors, in fact, the first director of education at a local real estate board that gave me a teaching job more years ago than I care to count, she used to say all the time, a lot of people, how did she put it? A lot of people start in real estate, but a lot of them don't end up in real estate. Meaning they'll leave the field after a few years because they realize it's not as easy as you call it, the commercials or some of these shows would portray. And again, I'm telling you stories from my classrooms. I just try to give people a realistic picture. And I always tell them you can't sit home and put a shingle outside your door and wait for customers to come. You've got to work the business. You've got to be on call. You've got to, without being obnoxious, always let people know that you are a real estate agent, and so forth and so on. And from everything I've heard over the years, I always go back to Pareto's principle. 20% of the agents are making 80% of the money.
Right.
And of course, you want to be in that 20%, and it's possible. It is possible to do that. But again, it's a job. Whether you do it part-time or full-time, you have to treat it like a real career, a real job.
Talking about the reality TV shows that you see on cable, they make it look a lot easier, a lot cheaper than it probably is. Has that genre of TV, for instance, has that set the industry back, or has it? Do you think it's been good for the industry?
I think it's good. I'm kind of glib about that. I think it's, or maybe I should phrase it, I think it's more good than bad.
Okay, yeah.
In the sense that the bad part, as I've just said, is it does make it look from the real estate agent point of view, it makes it look too easy to do, and that's not of service to the industry. On the other hand, I think it gives people, I think anything that exposes people to, some of the nuances or even looking at real estate in other parts of the country from where they are, some of the conversations that people have. A lot of real estate is about, I guess you could call it personal taste, right? Or architectural issues or whatever. You've got to know something about the physicality of properties. And more importantly, you've got to know something about the physicalities of what people want. I don't watch a lot of the shows, but I do occasionally. And, I'm talking to the TV. That's not, no, that's not going to sell. No, what are you, crazy looking at that? No, you don't.
All right.
The thing, I will tell you, the thing that as I said, I live up here in the Northeast and in a fairly high-priced area, as much of the Northeast is. And the only thing that gets me is sometimes looking at these properties and say, how big a piece of property can you get for that money? It's unheard of up here.
Right. So talk a little bit about what the reader needs, an investor wants to know about taxes. Just kind of a general view.
Get an accountant.
Yes.
Again, I'm not being glib, Bob. I get to a point again in my classes. There's a chapter in the book about taxes, and I do talk about it in the classroom. And when I get to that point, I have a big PowerPoint slide that says get a real estate accountant, and I emphasize real estate accountant. That is someone familiar with real estate. Real estate is very, very, as you probably know, real estate is very favorably treated by the tax people, right, primarily through something called depreciation. And but there are, it's not uncomplicated. Something that I learned from my accountant over the years in non-real estate issues, just my own personal stuff of teaching income and and writing income, was that a lot of times the IRS will come out with an opinion that is an interpretation of a law. And that opinion will potentially change your tax situation. And it's not something they're going to send me a letter on. They send it, they alert the accountants, or I guess on these services or whatever, or in touch. And the accountants, or even they have to look it up. They'll say, I heard there was I can still remember a conversation with my accountant. So I heard there's a new opinion on income from working at home, or something along those lines. And he said, let me look it up and to see how it has an effect. So yeah, seriously, I defer that, and I really encourage people very early on. And this kind of comes back to the management thing. That accountant should be in place on the day you buy the property. And I say that because, most of us who work for somebody or get a regular check and all that, we worry about taxes once a year in April. But if you are an investor, especially in real estate, it's important to know up front to plan for your taxes, because there may be ways of investing in this or buying that or characterizing a particular thing you're doing for the building in such a way that it becomes deductible and rather not deductible, or credits. And there's also that tax credits for various things. There were some tax credits, and that's by the way, both at state and local levels. Tax credits a while back in some places for energy efficient appliances, especially things like air conditioning units, things like that. And you want to know about those. And mostly it's the accountants who can help you through that.
Yeah, I asked that question for a reason, because I felt like you were going to say that. I'm a big believer in the CPAs, and you need them to do their expertise because there's a lot of technical aspects of it, and you want them to be getting that right for you, save you as much money. Right. And so I do appreciate the answer on that. So how do you? This is the one thing that I think you'd agree that you want to find out fairly quick in the process. How do you assess that the transaction you're going to make, the property you're going to buy, will make enough money to make it a good investment of your time and resources?
How much is enough money?
True.
I'm sorry, but that again. You're hitting me in a question that I run through with my classes. But I will give you hopefully a little better and a little more elaborate answer than that. But I do start out by asking the general question in a class where I'll say, how much, first we need to define profit. And if I may take a second to do that so the audience really understands where I'm coming from. The primary profit motive, if you will, or direction, is ongoing income. In other words, every year you're making more money than you're spending on keeping the building going. Just that simple. That rents are coming in at a higher rate than expenditures are going out. I define it that way because there are other ways to make money in real estate. For instance, capital gains. I buy at one price, and 10 years later I sell at another price, and I've made a profit. But most real estate investors, because of the unpredictability of the future, most real estate investors want an investment that will begin paying profits almost immediately. So once we've established that, I'll ask my class the question, what do you think is a reasonable profit in real estate? And I will get, 10%. And by the way, the profit is measured over what you've put in initially. You're paying for cash investments. 10%, 25. I remember one student, 25%, whatever. And the bottom line is that the market is going to control investments. Is going to control profit. I may want 20% a year profit, but if the market is telling me the best I'm going to do is 10%, then I have to be satisfied with that. And again, forgive me for I'm using a lot of my stories and all that, but I knew an investor, a family member actually. He owned a couple of buildings locally in New York City, and medium-sized rental property, residential rental properties. And he was telling me that he was looking for another property. And at the time, and I said, that's nice, and where are you looking? The local neighborhood. And he said to me, as long as I can get my 10%, and that again is 10% on what he actually invested, the cash investments. As long as I get my 10%, then everything else looks good, I'll buy the property. And in my head, because I tend not to want to give advice to relatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my head, I said, and you're never going to buy a property in this market. Because I knew that at that time point, there was people were settling for 4%, 5%, 6% profit. And these were in the days of interest rates of 2.5%. There was no place else to put your money. If you wanted to put it in a lot of people felt the stock market was very risky, and like gambling. Certificates of deposit, even treasury bonds were paying terribly low interest. So they were happy with a 4%, 5%, 6% return on a property, because they got the tax benefits, which helped make that more valuable. They looked towards long-term capital gains possibilities. There were other things that made it worthwhile doing. So but the basic profit calculation was something you would think would be fairly low.
Right.
So a lot of this stuff is market driven. And by the way, I mentioned things like the stock market and all that. The market really controls the profitability on this.
Well, I tell you what, wish we had more time, John. This is a great resource. Real Estate Investing in Plain English. Dr. John Bogle. Hey, John, thanks for coming on the program, and good luck to you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.